Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. God bless you. Evening, I'm sorry. God bless you, and thank you for sharing your time and yourself with thoughts and words study, basically word supper study, as we continue to pursue. And really, what we do is we dine with the Lord, and we dine in the Lord, because ultimately that's what we're doing. We're dining in what God gave us. That's the reason why we reflected on this from a perspective of Eucharist or communion, Lord's Supper, as the body and the blood of Christ is literally what we dine on. It's literally the blood, and the body is really the Word of God. And he says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and God was the Word. And so, as we dine on the Word, study the Word, I mean, you have to take the Word in. I think a lot of times people think they are reading the Bible from an intellectual and kind of an external. I can't remember the advanced scholastic term for it, academic term for it, but they're actually, from an external perspective, simply analyzing the word without in any way receiving the word. While that's important for scholarship, that we analyze and we use critical thinking and we use high level criticism, low level criticism, and other types of methods to analyze scripture, that's very important. Thank God for the Germans. Don't let anybody lie to you. Germans are the ones who were very important to bringing us to that. However, we don't want to be so stoic and so external or analytical that we don't realize that we are being benefited with access to the genuine words of our Creator that are to be honored and glorified and to be understood. So study to show thyself approved unto God. 2 Timothy 2:15, right? Workman that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, what rightly categorizing, structuring, uh, putting in the contextual position they ought to be put in. That's what you have to do with the word. You have to put it in the contextual position that it actually belongs in. You know, thou shalt not kill. That's one of my favorites from the Ten Commandments, right? Thou shalt not kill does not mean that you should not defend your homeland or your community or your family members. That's not what it means. It means you should not murder. You should not kill for malicious reasons. You should not have malice aforethought. That's basically how we determine murder, right? You should not be operating in I can get a gain of some kind or take advantage, or I just don't like this person. I'm angry at this person, so I will kill them, a la Cain, right? My heart's broken how I got treated as God started his family of dominion, right? We started back there in Genesis 4, or before Genesis 4, actually. No, that's not when you can use force to the point of literally hurting someone or potentially taking their life. However, if your home, your land, your family, your people are under attack from another people, you are perfectly within your legitimacy to definitely kill. That thou shalt not kill was really intended to imply thou shalt not murder. And yet, because of interpretations issues, as well as lack of contextual application, you have to apply per the context, cultural and historical and so forth. Only then will you get an accurate reading. So rightly dividing the word of truth, back there, 2 Timothy 2:15 again, comes into play. All right, our lesson for today. Our topic is still God is making a holy place. That's still our topic. This will be the last week of the month on that, so we probably will wrap it up. This will probably be it, unless the Lord just tell me go back to it. But I think we've done enough in this area, because there's so much in this area that I can take you. We can go for rides for months on this one thing. We'll see what the Lord gives, but I think we'll wrap it here. Exodus chapter 1. Okay, we're gonna go to Exodus chapter 1, and we're going to start there at verse 1. Then we'll take off from there, go some other spots here where we need to go to see this concept being, or not concept, this actual reality precept of God being played out in the Bible for us to understand what God is doing. All right, Exodus chapter 1, verse 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt: Every man and his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. Before I go on, I want to say, uh, historically, we need to understand one thing. There were 75. It is counted out as 75 souls of Jacob's line that went into that were uh, in Egypt once they were about to leave Egypt. Came out of I'm sorry in the land of Abraham and came into Egypt. Remember, they came into the land of Egypt because there was a famine, a drought in the land, and they had come to Egypt, and that's the reason that they found that Joseph, whom they thought they was killed, whom they had sold off, their brother, was actually the prince in Egypt. Okay. Well, not the prince. He was the high level governor. Let me clarify that because you'll think of Moses, and that's not what we're talking about quite yet. Okay, so 75 of them that came into Egypt during the drought and famine. And of course, at the end of Genesis, we can see, maybe we'll touch that in a minute, how that worked out. But all right, so there's 70 plus Joseph was already there, his wife, and so his kids. So we got about 75 of them in Egypt when this kicks off in Exodus. So you have that context. All right. Verse 6, and Joseph died, and and all his brethren, and all that generation. So they all lived and passed, stayed in Egypt. All right. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Okay. We don't die, we multiply. All right. They were growing by leaps and bounds. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph, didn't know how Joseph had blessed the previous king with the interpretation of that dream of the 7 years of fat cows, and the 7 years of lean cows, and how that warned him how to prepare for that famine that drove his people there, that drove Joseph's people there, later on, as we see. All right. So the king didn't know him. He said unto the people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. There's so much commentary I can make on all these things. I'll say one little point here. Affluence breeds lack of fruitfulness. Affluence breeds lack of fruitfulness. What you will find with affluent people is they will have less and less children almost every time, with some exceptions, of course. But generally, they are greedy. And after a while, they don't want to have many children because they don't want to share it. And they don't want to share with each other. It's the nature of the flesh coming into play. This is the reason why Jesus makes the statement in the Gospels in Matthew, and he says, what? It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. Affluence has to be carefully managed by the heart of a righteous person. You must keep your heart righteous. You must keep on yourself. As Paul said, I keep under my flesh, I keep under my body. I watch it. I keep track of myself. And I never think more of myself than I ought to. That's very important because that wealth will get you basically prohibited from going to heaven. All right. So, but here they have less people. Israel, the poor people who came over because they needed some food because of the drought and the famine, they have now outnumbered them. That should ring some flags up in this modern era. They have now outnumbered them. All right. They are mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them. Verse 10. Lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, in other words, if a war starts, they join also our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters, I'm sorry, to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Good enough. We went out to verse 12. Okay, Exodus 1 went 1 through 12. So, of course, I want to read enough for you all to have some context. I want you to also read more after this, go on from here, move on to the next phase of this, because it's going to help you better understand what the principles here are. But that's a good start. So God is making a holy place. Now, there are so many things that we can talk about, as I said earlier, but primarily we want to continue this conversation about Israel and how Israel is this model that God is using to show what he's doing to make a holy place. From Adam, which we started from, we kind of summarize this. We saw how God shifted his focus. If I'm a little unstable, just hang on. Hopefully the signal improves. Okay. God shifted his focus from the sons of God, which were the divine sons of God. Call them angels, if you prefer, cherubim and all those things. God shifted his focus after the disobedience, clearly an uprising of Lucifer in heaven. He shifted his focus to making sons out of the dirt. All right, out of the dust of the earth, God made sons. And we see God doing this or expressing this in Genesis chapter 1, which we talked about, and how God moved them forward and shifted them from where they were to another place in Him, because He wanted to have sons that He could rely upon to rule over His earth, because it's His earth, it's His land, and He has a right to rule, and He has a right to put who He wants in his land. That's God's privilege. Anybody who owns something, he makes something, he creates something, it's his and his or hers. And they ought to have the right to give it to and have say so over who occupies it and enjoys the privilege of it. It's the same with any inheritance. If you have your seed, then you have a right to say, I think I want to let them have this, or I want this one to have that, or whatever. It's yours. You have a right to give it to who you want to give it to. All right. So we saw that progress. We saw it go from Adam to Eve, Cain and Abel, go on to Enosh. We saw the men, and we got to Abram. We talked a bit aspects about Abram and his family coming into place to some degree. And why the calling of God, not all the details, but the calling of God of him and the work of him. All right. And how God uses him as a model for the rest of the people of the earth, and that he's going to bring forth, because he chose and said it, bring forth a generation out of them. If we remember, let's go there just for a quick moment to Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12. Go back there with me for a moment, then we'll come back forward here. All right. So important that we stay contextual. So now the Lord had, verse 1, the Lord had said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy father and out of thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Don't forget, this is after the case where the people of Akkad and Sumer and Nimrod lineage had tried to build a tower to make their own name great. All right. Verse 3, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. All right. All families of the earth be blessed in your family, in your generation. That is what basically, that now you can see that God has promised and applied to Abraham's lineage. Then we know how he transferred to Isaac, his son, who was born of Sarah or Sarai. And then we see this little division there, where another division had to be made between Esau and Jacob. And Esau was not the one chosen, rather Jacob was. And so that was a whole, we went through that whole story basically. Then we saw the troubles that went along with Jacob, and how he had The wife he desired was held back, and the sister was slipped in, Layla or Leah. You can use whichever pronunciation you prefer. And then he had to work 7 more years. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. The first one, 7 years, and now 7 more years for the marriage to Rachel or Raquel, whom he really wanted to marry, and how the sons were blessed. And I went through the lines of that last time, so we won't go back there. So now we're seeing the next level of this, because when they got into the poverty of the famine, they were forced to go to Egypt. That was the plan of God. Let's say this again because this is really important. That was the plan of God. Don't let anybody think or tell you that when things happen in your life, God is not there, that God is missing in action. This is not true. God is not missing in action. And God knows the thoughts that he has toward us. He knows his plans that he has toward us, as Jeremiah talks about and gives us insight on. He wants us to have not evil, but peace. He's planning on good. However, there are some things that we need to grow through. There are some levels of maturity we need to assent to that many times folks are just not willing to do on their own. I don't know about you, but every time I think about I'm going to go run a mile or two, or I'm going to do some working out like that, I start coming up with excuses for why I should wait. Maybe I'll do it later. I gotta do this right now. This other paperwork needs to be done. Let me go ahead and do that. We have a way of finding excuses not to do the things that we need to do. And what a wise man I once heard lecturing talking about, he says you need to find a reason to win. Find a reason to win. Tell yourself a reason why you're going to win. Well, what does that mean? Don't allow your mind, I'm going to say your flesh mind from a spiritual perspective, talk you out of your best blessing and your benefit. Don't be talked out of what God has already said you're called to, what's already got your name on it, because it's going to take a little difficulty to get to it. It's got your name on it. You got to get it. So this is what Israel has, or really Hebrews right now in Israel, as his name was changed, Jacob's name changed, had to consider as well. And what God was doing in this case, like a good coach and good parent, he was putting them through a few trials. He was allowing them to be positioned to have authenticity and discipline. Yeah, authenticity, because they have a right, because they have authentically done the things that were necessary to get to where they're going. Sometimes that's part of what God is doing in our lives, where he's like, I'm getting you authenticity. You say, well, don't you just want to bless me with it? He said, yeah, but you won't be there authentically, and others will argue that you don't have a right to be there. But when I say you belong there, there's nothing else to be said. So then that's God talking, and that's how God operates. So them going to Egypt first, the place of punishment, the place of trial, uh, is a great thing for them to do. They've been through the fire. The wilderness is really the term often referred to going to Egypt. Jesus went to Egypt too. Oh no, yeah, he went to the wilderness too. 40 days, 40 nights. He went to the wilderness, right? He did. He went through fasting. Jesus went through. He went to the wilderness. Well, the time that he was doing the fasting was that portion, but 40 days, 40 nights. But he went to Egypt as well. I want you to say Egypt because I want you to remember when he was a child, the king Herod wanted all the boy babies killed and under 2 years old, and Jesus was in that list. And he had to go move to the wilderness and live in the wilderness for years. Just want to make sure I get clarified that I'm saying both things because they're both running through my mind, but just for your sake, you understand what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, so now we see Israel moving forward out of the book of Genesis, where in chapter 50, the last book, the last chapter in Genesis, Joseph has left a blessing with the family. In verse number, let's see, verse number 20, he says, but as for you, after they're talking to him, everything has been discussed, and they've had this like family reunion. But as for you, ye thought evil against me. Remember, they sold him. They saw the Ishmaelites. They saw the Midianites coming, and they sold him and then handed him over to the Ishmaelites, right? So Joseph, after this incident with his brothers, just so we can make sure we're in context, they wanted to kill him anyway. They didn't like him. So upset with him, daddy's favorite. He got that coat. He's the one that God uses as, that daddy Daddy meaning Jacob. Okay, just so we're clear. Uh, Daddy is using as an administrator to keep an eye on us when we're out here supposed to take care of the different sheep and things forth that we have, and we're watching. I'll say livestock to be general, and he tells, and he then had the dream with the sheaves, and come on now, he's just rubbing it in, right? But he was telling them the truth. He was just being honest and being really innocent, not thinking that they would operate in that level of evil. They sold him. He ended up with Ishmaelites, which Ishmael is what, the other brother, right? Abraham he married, lay with, and basically by laying and on her being a servant to Sarah, Hagar, right, and had the child Ishmael. That's right. So the Ishmaelites are the seed of that child. All right. Now Midian is the seed of who? The child that Abram had. Later on, after Sarah died, he married Keturah, and he had 6 more sons with Keturah, right? And one of those sons is Midian. And so when you say he ran into the Midianites, that then is the family of that son of Abram. Once again, it's still all in the family that he was sold to. And then they are the ones later transit over to the Ishmaelites, then to the Egyptian leader Potiphar. Then his wife causes Joseph to go be put in jail, claiming a false charge of rape. And but he ends up in the palace. So there we go. That quick summary of that. So Joseph says, "You meant it for evil." Let's go back to that. Verse 20, Genesis 50 and 20. You had thought to evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save many or much people alive. All right. So this is like the last part of Joseph's conversation with them. He says to them that when you all make a promise and a vow to me, that when you all go to the land that flow with milk and honey, the promised land, Joseph is completely clear about that vision. He knows it's true. What God says is true. They're going to go to a land of milk and honey. He said, "Be sure to come back and pick up my bones." Keep reading down the chapter if you want. "Take me to the land of promise. Don't leave my bones here in Egypt, in the land of wilderness. Don't leave me in the place of testing, the place of trouble and trial. Take me with you all to the promised land when you go on to the promised land." And that is what they did later on. Now, let's go back now to Exodus, now chapter 1, where we are. Remember our context, God is making a holy place. Israel is growing by leaps and bounds. I already explained to you how they were about initially 75 of them that went into Egypt. All right. Now, when they come into the land, and this is about 1875 BC. 1875 BC range is when they come into Egypt, and the family members are 75 of them, right? And between that time and the time of the book of Exodus, when literally we run into the circumstance where Moses is getting ready to come onto the scene and comes onto the scene, it is about 275 years, puts us at about 1600 BC. All right, somewhere in that range, not an exact date, okay, but around that range time period. We have Moses literally in place at 1525 BC. Now, this is as if I'm teaching a regular class, because that's stuff I would say put on a test, right? So what year did Moses kind of come into play? 1575 BC. All right, now he comes into play here. He's in the palace. The story is what we're going to talk about a bit and talk about what it leads to real quick here, hopefully. Now, here we go. Now, the king did not know them. He doesn't know Joseph. He don't know the greatness and blessing that Joseph was to them. And he's concerned that they have outpopulated them. They have outgrown them. Well, what have they grown to? What we have in the history documents, stuff that is drawn from a lot of documents, Egyptian documents, as well as some of the writings back from the Hebrews at the time period, is that from that 18 period of time where 1875 up to about the 1600, 275 years, Israel has grown from 75 members or 75 family members population to about 2.5 million in population. These people have been getting it on. Okay, not trying to be funny, but they've been growing. They've been really growing. This is the reason why the king of Egypt is panicking. All of a sudden he says we got 2.5 million people here, and they outnumber us. Is what he referenced there. All right, they outnumber them, and he said, we're in big trouble here. We got to do something about this. There's too many of them. What if we run into a war and they choose the opposition, and we couldn't fight them? We couldn't defend ourselves against them. We have to do something about them, right? And that's their mindset, and that's why he's afraid of what's going on at that time. So he says, let's do this. Take that actual scripture. Um, Come, let us deal with them wisely, and lest they multiply and it come to pass that then when the war comes out. Okay, I discussed that. Verse 11. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. All right. So what do we have is that the Israel is assigned by taskmasters to help build up a city to celebrate the king of Egypt. All right. And that seems more in punishment, more like God is some kind of way not watching over them, or God is not caring properly for them if you were look at it from just on the ground, looking up. But God is still in charge, and God is still working a plan. You see, when you were basically a nomadic people, which Israel was, remember, he had flocks and sheep and so forth from Laban. Come on. And this is how they had been living. They followed and with flocks of sheep and cows and so forth. You got to walk, you got to follow the grass. You got to follow where the foliage is, where they can eat and where the water is. So you're kind of like a cowboy on what's the name of one of my old shows, Rawhide. You gotta go back and that's an old black and white show. You gotta follow the path where the stuff is, where the water is. So here they are, and they are following that. They're nomadic until that situation that forced them into Egypt. God forced them into Egypt. And then when they got into Egypt, they multiplied like wildfire. So that's showing you he's blessing you. You're fruitful. 2.5 million in 275 years. Them people were doing it. All right. And then, then they get put into position to build cities for the king, for the Pharaoh. These are treasure cities. Take note, treasure cities, which means it's gold, it's silver, it's diamonds, it's rubies, it's emeralds, it's bronze. It's, I don't know if had iron quite working yet there, but in that time period, they are building refined, beautiful cities, wonderful things in honor of Ramses. Or not Ramses, I apologize. It's going to be called Ramses later, but the city is, but it's actually the Pharaoh that's current. And I can't think of his name. I had to read it somewhere, and it's not crossing my mind right now. I think it started with an M, but I might be mixing it up. So don't go with that. Uh, but they're building these beautiful places. They're learning crafts. This is my point, from nomadic to building cities. They're learning skills. They're learning architecture. They're learning building engineering. They're learning refinery. They're learning craft of how do you smelt gold, and how do you smelt brass, and how do you cut diamonds, and they still cutting diamonds, by the way. How do you cut rubies, and how do you learn all that stuff? Well, God put them in the position under Egypt to learn crafts. Look at God. You say, well, what does that mean? Sometimes God puts you in a position, on a job, or a position where you're doing stuff that you wouldn't have chosen to go do. Back to my running example. But God says, I know you need to know this, because one day you're going to be in your own house. Wait a minute. I think I hear somebody operating in a blessing if they don't understand this right. Yes, God will cause you to serve in someone else's house, just like in your parents' house. At some point in your life, you're serving in your parents' house. Later on, you may have to serve in someone else's house. But God will cause you to serve in someone's house because he's prepping you for how to serve or handle, better word, your own house. Once you learned how to make someone else's house beautiful, there's no limits on what you can do to make your own house. Well, watch this. God is working a work in his people. He's working a work in them to teach them what the land of milk and honey is all about. He's trying to teach them what real goodness and beauty is, as the reference to the Messiah coming in Isaiah chapter 7 is. He will drink milk and honey. so he will know what is good. You got to learn what's good. If you've never lived in anything but a 3-room shack, well, not 1-room shack, you don't know what beauty is. But when you have to go to a house that's a palace or it's palatial, and you help to maintain it or you help to build it, you know what goes into it. You know how to make a beautiful place. Well, here's the reason for that. God is trying to raise up a people. Look at him, who will build him a holy place. Effectively, down the road, they will actually become his holy place. But their first step, which you'll see under Solomon, is they will literally build a temple to the Lord. Where would they get all these skills from? Raising sheep? No. They're going to get these skills because God has taught them and to put them in position to learn them. The reason why the second temple was so big and so wonderful, though I don't approve of it spiritually, but it was the second temple after Babylon smashed the first one. If you go a little skipping history for me, skip forward, because Herod, that is Herod the Great, attended the architectural schools of Rome. He was in Rome. He was literally a Roman, basically a Roman citizen. And that's why he was approved to be the king when Israel was under that governorship. And, these kings, the Herod and Herod II and the other Herod, and I can't think of the thing referred to his name. So anyway, they had skills because of being under some kind of leadership, under some kind of training, under some kind of direction. This is how God operates in our lives. When we better recognize that, we'll stop stressing and struggling with what we might find ourselves put in position to have to work through and work with. God is many times just building us up for the next level of what's coming in our lives that he wants us to be able to handle. Yes, to his glory, but also for your great benefit, that you will understand what God is doing and how wonderful the God you serve actually is. It's not by chance. So here they are. Egypt is calling themselves, we're going to punish them. That's what we'll do. We'll wear them out. It's too many of them. They got too much energy at nighttime. We got to cut them down. They got to be knocked out. Back, go to bed. Stop having, you know what I'm saying? All right. He wants to, after that, they get better. There's still too many of them. He makes an order. All right. Verse 15, jump to Exodus 1, verse 15. And the king of Egypt spake unto the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah. That's very famous. Queen Shiphrah, some people call her that for a reason. And the name, the other one was Puah. And he said, when you do the office of midwife to the Hebrew women, and you see them upon the stools, so we know how they had their babies on the stool, all right. If it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. All right. So I'm sure you've heard this, but you see the envy of the blessing of God blessing their line and seed has affected the Pharaoh, the king, so much. He wants the babies killed. Sounds like the time of Jesus, huh? A little bit of an echo. All right. Well, Jesus is literally the echo. His time is an echo to this. Um, and they agree, but then they won't do it. The babies keep on coming. I'm not going to read every text. You just keep on reading 17, 18, 19. And when they're questioned by the king, when he says, hey, I thought I told you all to kill these male babies, right? And this is where they use as their excuse. Let's go to verse 19. And the midwife said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women. What? The Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively. They are lively. What does he mean by that? What do they mean by that? Well, the suggestion is that the Egyptian women are laid back, or they're slow to moving forward or ready to birth. Let's back to it. Affluence, bougie. Oh, wait, stop it from hurting right now. Wait, no, wait, no. Whereas those who can't afford the shots, I'm just picking on y'all. There's like, just take it and hurry up, get that baby out. Squat harder and hurry up. All right. So there's a difference in affluence will make you behave differently in the time and the circumstance. And they use this as an excuse that, the Egyptian women, they slow. For the Hebrew women are lively and they are delivered air even before we come into them. They already dropping them babies. We come in there to deliver the baby. They already dropping them, okay? We can't do it fast enough. We can't find them. They already got the baby. We can get to kill it. That's what they use as an excuse. So the Pharaoh wants to kill him, and Moses' mother puts him, you're going to chapter 2 here, puts him in a little raft she made herself, and she puts the raft on the Nile River. This is basics of the story that you probably know. And she seals that raft with pitch and so forth so it's waterproof. She does it right. And his sister, um, Miriam, will watch his older sister, Miriam. We'll see her later. She watches the raft go down the Nile and sees that the king's daughter, I believe it's his daughter, if I'm correct, comes up and picks up that baby and takes it in the house. And that's how Moses gets into the palace. So that's why we get a sound 1525 BC number from Moses being born, the time period he comes into the Egyptian household, based on historical records. Okay, so far we see how God is working. I gotta hurry, guys. Wow. All right, we see how God is working. We see how he brought them forward, and he's brought them in a position to be trained and skillful now. He's making them ready to build a great temple to him and making them ready so they can be a blessing that he promised Abram. They would be, all nations shall be blessed by them, right? And so now you're seeing that God, when God has chosen them, we're seeing now when God has chosen them, he chooses to consecrate them as well. Let's jump down to chapter 19 of Exodus. We know the plagues happened in between there. I'm not trying to teach you the whole story of Israel. I'm just trying to share with you this direction. All right. So, and we turn to chapter 19 and verse number 5. It says, "Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my commandments," this is God to Israel. I said commandment, I'm sorry, "keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine." All the earth is whose? God. So he's going back to that original thing. We go all the way back to Genesis 1. I'm putting in charge who I want to put in charge over my earth, because it's my earth. Very important piece there. All right, verse 6. "And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. You shall be a kingdom of priests." You're designed to be priestly. You're designed to carry my message to the world. You're designed to carry prayers to me. You're designed to be an intermediary standing between the heavenly and the earthly. That's what you're designed to be, Israel, right? And a holy nation. These words, okay, this is the Lord. He's telling Moses, "These words shall you speak unto the children of Israel." So he's telling the children of Israel through Moses what they need to do. At this point, Moses has already been commissioned. I didn't go through all that with you, but the point I wanted to say to you is that God chooses them. And when he chooses them, Genesis 12, he consecrates them, Exodus 19. When God consecrates you, he told them to, by the way, he told them to wash up before he gets here. By the way, you can find that in scripture, how he says, "Get ready, I'm coming, and I'm going to be there with you. Y'all need to wash up, get clean your mind up." But the symbolic clean your mind up. But actually, he told them to clean their bodies, clean their clothes, because I'm coming down to visit with you. All right. So uh, let's apply this, kind of extend this forward. So then God is speaking. He chooses, he consecrates, and then he deals with you and develops you, even what might even be affliction to you, in order to make you into what he has called you to be, what he wants you to be, which is never negative, but always favorable, and eventually it's going to be seen as very quite favorable. Go with me quickly. I know my 03 already, so in about 2 more minutes, maybe 4, and we'll wrap this up. Isaiah 48, Isaiah chapter 48. See this theme repeated in Isaiah chapter 48. We'll see that God is consistent about this concept and what he's doing, and it'll kind of help us look at it from the right perspective. For my name's sake, for my name's sake, I defer my anger, and for my praise I will refrain for thee, that I cut thee not off. Now this is where, but at this point we're talking Isaiah 730 or so BC. It's been quite a few hundred years here, and they've been disobedient on a regular basis, going back and forth. Sorry about that bounce. And he's like, you know what? If it was for my name in you, and that's a whole nother lesson, God's name in you, but if it wasn't for my name on you and what it represents, I'd cut you off. That means I would kill you. I would destroy you. But he's not going to do it because of his name's sake. See, when you're called by God, okay, correct. When the Lord has called you for a purpose, he means to fulfill that purpose in your life. And if you won't do it, he'll go down and reach down to your next generation, your children, your grandchildren, or somebody, and he'll just get you out of the way. But God will work his purpose through you if you're willing to do what he says he wants you to do. This is their job, to be a holy nation, right? A kingdom of priests. We just saw that. What did we see them do in history between this point here and back to Moses? All kinds of rebellion, all kinds of disobedience. All right. So he says, for my name's sake, I will defer. Right. Behold, verse 10, I have refined thee, but not with silver. I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction, in the furnace of affliction. For my own sake, even for my own sake will I do it. For how should my name be polluted? And I will not give my glory unto another. So he's like, he's basically saying, I've got to clean up my name. My legacy is at risk here because of you all's behavior. So I'm going to clean it up. And the affliction you go through is going to show me cleaning it up. All right. However, I'm going to use the affliction to bring you out if you're willing to obey me. Sometimes we need to be willing and obedient. That's all we need to do. If you're willing and obedient, ye shall eat the good of the land. If you're willing and obedient, you'll see your fruitfulness grow. If you're willing and obedient, you'll see favor come your way. God corrects, God chastens, but it's only out of love and only out of purpose. Two things, love and purpose. One more text. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 12, and then I can kind of wrap this up. Hang on. I'm almost at my 4-minute mark from what I said. All right. Hebrews 12. So I'm in the New Testament here, but I'm looking for the principles. We're teaching principles, so not necessarily chronological on every aspect of it. So hang on for that. All right. And what does he say in verse 6? Hebrews 12, verse 6. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. Read that again. Whom the Lord loveth, we can use the old English, he spanks, chasteneth, and he scourges every son. That's that he receives. That's what he does. Someone you love and who you have received to be your own, who you take responsibility for and you ownership for, then you must discipline them as well. That's what God did. That's what he does. That's the reason why when you see Israel impacted, getting impacted or coming across these other nations who don't belong to God per se, why hasn't God chastened them? Because they're not someone he's received. You look at other people who are in the world and you say, well, they're doing all this. I've never done anything like that. I kept my life way better than this. I've never done this. I've never been involved with that kind of stuff. And yet I have these issues. And the Lord is trying to tell you by principle. Here I'm teaching the principle. I'm not messing with them because they're not mine. I'm not correcting them because they don't belong to me. I correct the ones who belong to me. Do you discipline other people's children? How would you look going to other people's houses? I'm going to come whip your child for you today. Well, God doesn't go around whipping the people who belong to other gods. He doesn't do that. When it gets time, all of them are going to get punished if they don't come over, if they don't hear the voice of the salvation that now we have through Jesus Christ. If they don't hear the voice of the priests, those who are in between heaven and earth, bringing the message. Who's that priest? Israel in this case. They're the primary aspect of that priesthood in the Old Testament. Still is to a degree now, but but we are part of that now. But yet he uses us to correct others, to bring them into knowledge, so they can know, so they have an opportunity to know. But he doesn't initially go directly at them here in the time that we're talking about with Moses and early Israel, because he has chosen Abraham's seed. He said, Jacob is mine. Jacob, that's my heritage. Remember, we read that to you earlier. So what I guess I'll leave you with is just to understand the Lord correcting your life or getting involved is a sign that God has received you. Unlike Cain, Unlike Cain, whom the Lord said, sin is at the door. If you do well, will you not be accepted? What does that imply? You're not accepted. But if you do well, then you will be accepted. But if you don't belong to God. So why didn't God kill Cain? Because he didn't belong to him. That's a whole nother lesson about the scapegoat. But he didn't belong to him. He sent him out. He just sent him out of sent him away from where they were, ran them through the rest of the world, some other places, and that's another conversation. But so thank God. What has really happened is God has chosen to make Israel and his seed and that people his holy place, his holy people, and that he's going to correct, and he's going to bless, and he's going to raise them up in spite of their enemies' uh, um, aggression against them. He's going to make them greater than their enemy. He's going to make them bigger than their enemy. This is how God blesses. This is how he just break, what do you call it? He defies the odds. He just no, yeah, they're not going to make it. Watch them make it because the Lord is on their side. What about you and I? How do we see this? How does God bless us in the face of enemies when some people thought that you might have been destroyed? But the Lord says, no, I'm going to bless you. When I bless you, there's no one that can stop me from blessing you. I'll increase your people. I'll increase your numbers. But we're going to kill them. You try it. I'm going to increase them. Not only that, I'm going to make them skillful. I'm going to teach them how to read. I'm going to have their slave masters. In the case of African Americans, I'm just picking on African Americans right now, but also poor whites and other people who were slaves, some indentured, some forever. But just like I'm gonna teach how the slave masters just feel compassion for you and teach you how to read, and then you're gonna become a Frederick Douglass, and then this, and then you're gonna this, and then you're gonna be in the White House. The Lord has a way of saying that I'm going to bring you up and out of your troubles. Even those who left England and Europe, escaping the brutality of the kings and the lordships of the that period of time. I can't think feudal periods of time later on. Previously, I'm sorry, yeah, later on, but the feudal periods of time, 11, 1200, so forth, AD. The Lord made a way to escape. They made an escape across the ocean somewhere around 1400 or so, 1400 AD. I think what's that, 1492? We talk about Columbus, but that's another story. But the point is still, God made a way, so I can let you get out. Well, they're oppressing us. Yeah, we got to run from our own home. Yep. But where you're going to run to is going to be a blessing to you. And for them, that was a blessing. You got to kind of see everything in this context. I'm just saying this to you so you understand that God has a way of drawing you out if you will follow his lead. And that's what the Puritans were doing. That's what the Quakers were doing in those periods of time. We want to follow you, God. We don't want to have to follow the king. And I want you to know that when God is on your side, that's what you're going to see. So God's blessing to you. Pray this study has been beneficial to you, opens your eyes in some areas, and helps you to understand that God is working this principle of building a holy place in his people. God bless.